There we go. All right. So here we are at the beginning of the gallery. Creating this exhibition has been an absolute whirlwind. It had an exceedingly short lead-in time and was further complicated by COVID as we entered into a whole new world that changed pretty much everything. Saying that, it's been so much fun working on it. We've had an exceptional team across the museum and external companies, institutions, and individuals, one of whom were the designers, Skellen and Seeing Things. They were so good to work with and brought an amazing vision to this space. The entrance is one of my favourite moments. We've got the contemporary wooden structure, which echoes the significance of wood in the Bronze Age, and the gaps and the lighting evoke the rays of the sun, another hugely important element. So on to the background to the hoard. This is a late Bronze Age hoard, and it's been dated to roughly between 900 and 800 BC. In total, there are 453 bronze and copper objects that have been buried in 4 parts. So it's described as the Havering Hoard, one hoard, but it's in fact made up of 4 smaller caches, as it were. It's the largest hoard for London, the largest Bronze Age hoard for London, and it's the 3rd largest in the country as well. So the most important thing about it is that it was found as part of an excavation. So we have the potential to understand the hoard, how it fitted into the site and into the wider landscape. And this is very rare. The majority of Bronze Age hoards that are found in this country are as a result of metal detecting. And whilst we may have the opportunity to excavate the fine spot around the hoard itself, it's very rare to be able to get that bigger picture. The Havering Hoard was found in September 2018, and the museum was involved at quite an early stage. We recognised that this was a really important discovery, and we had the ambition to get it on display as quickly as we could. So quite early on, it was scheduled into the Docklands exhibition programme. And once those dates have been set, we really had to make it work. And that was incredibly challenging, given that we had processes such as the treasure process that we had to get through, and those were timings that were outside of our control. So here we have a graphic taken from the exhibition, which shows the site plan. It's a late Bronze Age ditched enclosure. So we can see here the entranceway to the enclosure. Here around the outside is the ditch. We've got the 4 hoards buried in the ditch here, which is directly opposite the entranceway, which faces east. We've got an arrangement of post holes in the centre, which look very much like a roundhouse, with a 4-posted structure in front, which might be a porch to the roundhouse. It might be another element. We have another 4-posted structure here. And all of these seem to be aligned along an east-west axis, which proves some significance to the burial spot for the hoard, lined up with the movement of the sun, and this may be at specific times of the year, for example, midwinter solstice. What else we've got going on in this site? We've got some tree throws down here, so evidence of some contemporary trees. We've got a fence line along here, and possibly also some enclosures for animals. And what might well be is an outdoor cooking area here as well. We've got hearths inside the roundhouse. So we've got quite a lot going on within our ditched enclosure, but in terms of the material culture that we discovered across the site, there wasn't a great deal of pottery and other remains, which is leading archaeological solutions to the theory that this was only seasonally occupied. The whereabouts are we talking about? It's called the Havering Hoard because it was found in the borough of Havering, the easternmost borough for Greater London. So it's over here on the eastern side, right on the border with Essex. The Bronze Age river, of course, flowed with a slightly different course, and it would have been much wider, unconstrained by the modern river wall. So our enclosure is the first bit of dry land, and then we've got marshes, and then we've got the River Thames. So this was a really significant landscape with access to vital resources. It's a point of connection with the wider world, and water, of course, held a huge amount of spiritual significance. Life depended on it, but it was also considered possibly a link between worlds, this one and the next. One of the challenges with displaying the Havering Hoard was the sheer number of artifacts and the fact that they are visually very similar. it's essentially a lot of broken objects, bronze and copper, and so a range of browns and greens. And this was a challenge then of how to build a layered dramatic experience beyond the reveal moment of the scale of the Horde. And also because of the scale of it's a new discovery from site, for quite a few months of the exhibition planning process, we had to work from photographs and also basic records, and we had to be able to pull out the narratives of the exhibition that we wanted to explore from those records. We didn't have direct access to the objects until much later. But even so, even with this challenge, we were still able to come up with some really engaging ideas behind which we could build our exhibition. And what emerged fairly early on was about the alignment of the site and the importance of the Sun and Bronze Age culture. And this is something we really wanted to pull out. I was really pleased that Skellen and Seeing Things, the designers, really got on board with this concept. And this is one of the early sketches that they created of the exhibition, with the doors to the gallery being down here, and this being the back wall across the opposite end facing the doors. And they wondered if we could in some way recreate the sun and the movement of the sun tracking through the gallery. And that kind of synchronicity with the Horde was discovered late on a Friday, as I've said, and the sun set while it was being excavated, and just how that we can go from that moment of discovery through to the sun rising at the opposite end. This is not just the design with the films, the AV, the photography, but it's also about the lighting and how the lighting's been used in the gallery, so that we have directional light coming from the east with very warm colours, which shifts in our laboratory section to a brighter white, kind of evoking that lab-like experience. So this is the detailed plan of the gallery that we had. So you come in through the entranceway and you very much start with this moment of discovery just down here. We've got the timeline here that you go through. And as I said in the tour, we played around with the timeline a little bit. To prehistory is always defined according to the technological change, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age. And so we wondered, could we relabel the timeline that we're all familiar with and thinking about the materiality of that? And the timeline's designed to move back in time from present day, going back to the Bronze Age. So you come out in the center where the four hordes are presented, set against the backdrop of the film. So that's the Dada moment. Here are the film, here are the hordes, here's all about them. And then we took some objects from the Horde and used it to draw out some of the stories around life in the Bronze Age, which we've displayed over here. And then the back wall is all about the context of understanding the Horde within the site of the ditched enclosure, and then placing that ditched enclosure into the context of the Thames Valley, of what else is happening in the Bronze Age. This is our lab section where we explore the people and the processes. And then finally, our conclusion moment down here. But that all makes it sound very neat, that we knew exactly what the stories we were going to tell, the A to B of the whole journey. But it kind of evolved in a much more organic way. So we started in September 2018 when the Havering Hoard was discovered. 3 of the hordes after that initial discovery of the first one were block lifted and delivered to Pieter Greaves, the conservator, shown here on the left-hand side of the screen. She micro-excavated them, being able to take note of the exact order in which the objects were buried within the Horde, the orientation of them, and also she was on the lookout for any of the organic remains, such as a wooden box, a fabric, or a leather bag that may have held the hordes. Sadly, there was no evidence of that, but she was able to spot the straw, which was the packing material around them. In the centre, we've got Sophie Adams, who wrote the finds report for the Horde. And then finally, on the right-hand side, we've got the Horde packed in its Stuart boxes on one of the shelves in the store. And it took until October, let me get my years right, October 2019 before we got the Horde into the museum. So pretty much it was 18 months from the point of discovery to the exhibition being ready to open. I can hear quite a high-pitched noise. Has anyone else got that?
Yeah, please, can you please turn the microphone? And Angela, can you check that everybody's muted, please? This is not coming for.
No, it's still there.
Must be a system thing. Can you speak? Just carry on talking, please, Kate,
Okay.
if you can.
All right, I will. Sorry if that is a little bit annoying. So in those processes of the 5 months once the Horde came into the museum, there was still so much exhibition work to be done. We had the condition checking with the necessary conservation, photography, case layouts, mount making, uploading onto the database, checking locations, updating locations, liaison with all the relevant stakeholders, a huge amount of work in quite a short time scale. We also held a researcher day where we laid out all 4 of the Hordes and invited relevant people from the archaeology world to come and take a look at the Horde, and also to share thoughts around some of the more unusual objects within the Horde, but also to test our narratives that we were choosing to pull out, especially around the theories behind hoarding. It takes a phenomenally long amount of time to lay out and unpack 453 objects and then carefully make sure each object goes back into the right bag. It was a large undertaking, and I think it's one of the very rare occasions that we had the entire Horde laid out in that way. The next challenge that we had was how to create an exhibition that's as engaging and as atmospheric as possible. And this is where I was really inspired by the power of place, the landscape. During those conversations with Andy Peachy and Lindsay Lloyd-Smith at Archaeological Solutions, we discussed the significance of exactly where the Horde was buried on the site and within the landscape. The alignment with the movement of the sun, as I've talked about, and also the fact that it's located right on the boundary between dry and wet land. So it's a really significant place. And I wanted to work with the landscape and the sun into the gallery. And we chose Chocolate Films to be able to develop this 15-minute film of the sun rising over the Rainham Marshes, which is the film that's projected against the back wall of the gallery. Filming the sunrise was a challenge, partly because of the time scale. At this stage, we were late into October. So we knew we wanted the right sort of weather conditions, clear skies, we wanted a bit of mist, that beautiful autumn mist. It is really timeless in a way. And so we had to get the right location as well. And we were so fortunate that RSPB Marshes were there on the doorstep of the find spot. So it's the right sort of geographical region, and the marshes themselves are a historic survival. And of course, the staff were incredibly helpful in facilitating all of this, of allowing us to be on site as the sun was rising to capture it. So we pretty much had 1 day window of opportunity to be able to get the film crew on site and to get the weather and the sun in the right place to be able to film it. But I would recommend, if anyone hasn't been to RSPB Marshes, you should visit them. They are a stunningly beautiful place, and it's a really interesting survival of the landscape that, you know, with a good dose of imagination, you can kind of imagine what that Bronze Age landscape would have been. We had to do a little bit of editing on the film and remove some of the modern intrusions from the horizon because they were just jarring for what we were trying to do. We were aiming not to say this is the Bronze Age landscape, but more that it is evocative of the Bronze Age. So the film places the Horde within the context of the landscape, something which I think is so relevant to our understanding of the purpose of Hordes. It also speaks to the timeless power of the sunrise as a moment of magic, regeneration, new beginnings, which I think can be just as powerful today as it was in the Bronze Age. Within the exhibition, we also used some objects from our collections to help add context to the Horde, or to show complete examples where only fragments were included within the Horde, such as with the swords. One interesting fact about the sword fragments, of which there are 38, is that none of them could be fitted back together. So we didn't have any conjoining pieces. So we can see there is a deliberate selection of objects and even which fragments were included. And looking at the range of artifact types, there were far more tools than weapons, and axes dominated this Horde. In total, there were 153 complete and incomplete axes. This highlights the importance of the axe to Bronze Age society, and in turn, the importance of wood within this society and how they managed the natural world. And it's the next slide where we've got the human remains. It was a carefully thought out decision about including the 2 Bronze Age crania, but I felt that it was really important to really draw out the people of the Bronze Age and also to show that the swords were not just there for ornamentation or display, that they were used as weapons, and that the Bronze Age was in fact quite a violent time. If we look at some of the more collection of crania that are from the Thames, for example, those in the Natural History Museum, there's been a PhD study on them. It's shown that there are high levels of violence, and often with a preponderance towards the male skulls as well. These 2 swords from our collection also represent the 2 different types of swords that we have got represented in the Horde as well. The uppermost one is a carp's tongue sword, and the slightly smaller one is a Ewart Park sword. These 3 objects from the Horde are quite rare for this country and have connections with Northwest Europe. And this is one of the stories that I was really keen to explore. It's timely, as Britain was working through various Brexit deadlines at the time. However, to be able to draw out this narrative, it really did depend on our understanding of the objects, and that's something that really came out in Sophie's report, but also refined through our conversation with the researchers, and also as we continue to work with Sophie to identify these unusual objects and just try and identify what it is that is quite so significant about them. The object in the middle is a terret ring, so these are rein guides for horse harnesses attached to carts or chariots, and these are the earliest examples known in the country. They're quite common finds in the Iron Age, but these are the very first Bronze Age ones. Another element which I really enjoy around exhibitions is planning out the interactives. The 2 main audience types of this exhibition was designed and planned for was families and schools, because of prehistory appearing on the national curriculum, but also an audience group that the museum describes as self-developers, people that already know a fair bit and have an appetite to know even more, to delve down. And so this is where building up a layered approach with the text and the interactives and the visuals all helps to be able to, so that the visitor can guide their own journey and find out exactly as much information as they want to. And we've also got more supplemental information available on the website as well. So these are some of the objects that come from the Horde that are associated with bronze casting. We've got the copper ingots, we've got the casting sprues, we've got broken up bits of sword, which could be interpreted as being broken up ahead of being melted down, of being recycled. But equally, there is a spiritual interpretation for why these objects are being deliberately broken. It takes a great deal of skill to be able to do it. You heat them up first. So a metal worker may have been involved in the creation of these objects, but also in the destruction of them. And then there's the careful choosing which fragments are included in the Horde. We have no idea what happened to the other fragments. They might have been melted down and turned into other objects. They may have gone to other places, but there is this choice behind it that if they were being broken down purely for recycling, surely we should be able to piece some of those fragments together. And this is one of the fun elements of the design. In this section on metalworking, we've got the case containing the objects, but we've also got some touch objects, and we've got the film of the metalworker casting the bronze axe that we use as one of the touch objects. And the designers have created the seating around the film and around the touch objects to kind of hint at sitting around a campfire to create that atmosphere. Within this exhibition, we also tried out some new techniques, one of which was this 3D photography, photogrammetry. And so the photographer's John Chase, he did a brilliant job at learning this technique of how you photograph an object on this turntable. So you're capturing all sides of it, and then the photographs get stitched together to create a 3D model, which can be labeled. And this was a great way of being able to explore a little bit more detail on the objects themselves. So for each of those labels, when you click on those labels, you get a little bit more information, such as you can see the notches on the cutting edge of the sword where it's been used. You can see some casting flaws. You can explore the detail of them. So we use them within the exhibition to have a more of an in-depth look at the objects, but it was also a way of trying to make some of the more important objects of the Horde widely available. This is a new discovery and so valuable new data for researchers who are studying this time in prehistory. And so we're trying to make the objects as widely accessible as possible. Another of the new techniques that we tried out was object projection mapping, which you saw in the film of the tour, where we were using that to illustrate the point that bronze could be melted down and reused a large number of times. So it kind of chimes with that theme that is very popular right now around sustainability and managing resources and just having respect for the natural world. One of my really favorite moments of planning an exhibition is when you've done a lot of the thinking and the planning and the object selection, is when you get to lay out the cases and you get to finalize what goes where. And here's a photo of me working with Cliff Thomas, our chief technician, who is absolutely brilliant at working out the technical side of how to mount the objects. But he's also got a really strong visual eye of, right, do it like this, have this one over here. So it's a great moment of the team coming together, and you start to get an idea of what it's going to look like, where the gaps are, where you need to fill them, where you're just trying to cram in, which I do a lot, cram in too many objects and you need to take some out. But it's invaluable in the process of planning the exhibition to lay out everything, check it all fits, and at that stage you can then create the more detailed drawings which we use for installation itself. One of the challenges with prehistory is that it feels very distant and that there is a disconnect between people today and the people then. So I really wanted to emphasize the people. We came up with this stylized way of drawing the Bronze Age people, of showing them in moments of activity with some of the objects around them. It's a very stylized way of doing things, and the inspiration has come from the Haynes manual, of showing really detailed where we know really details, and where we're not exactly sure on other details, it's a little bit more stylized or a little less detailed. We also used the film of the metalworker to illustrate the process of how you cast bronze, but it was also about showing the person behind the process. And we filmed here James Dilley, who is a brilliant researcher that in experimental archaeology and understands the processes of how you can actually do it. And for me, it's not just about the technical knowledge of the process, but it's also about a magical side of it, where this person knows how to take the right rocks, do the right processes from it. It goes to this golden molten material, and then it cools and is bright and shiny and a useful blade on an axe or a sword. It's that transformation of materials. And then finally, on the right-hand side, we've got Sophie Adams, who wrote the finds report. We also feature her in the Talking Heads film in the lab section, where we try and draw out some of the people and processes behind the discovery, behind the archaeology and the creating of the exhibition as well. Again, with filming, we had such a tight window to do it, and we spent an absolutely amazing day on a farm near Swindon, where James Dilley does a lot of his filming. And so he's got a really authentic, accurate setup. But it also shows that metal casting is not always a guaranteed process. Things can go wrong. And during the course of filming, his wooden tongs that used for lifting the crucible holding the molten metal set fire, and they disintegrated, causing us to lose the molten metal. We filmed this in December. Incredibly short days, so a really small window to be able to get this film down. And so we had to resort to modern measures to try and melt enough bronze down for a second time to have another go. But it also meant that I got to have an opportunity at using the bellows to keep the fire going. And I can tell you that is an incredibly hard process, much akin to patting your head and rubbing your tummy. You need coordination and skills just to be able to do it. But there's nothing like having a go, which really helps to illustrate or experience just what it would have been like. So in this case, we wanted to consider the wider activity and to put the Havering Hoard and its site in the bigger context of what else was going on in the Thames Valley, to really show just how important the Thames Valley is in the Bronze Age and how there is this huge concentration of activity that we can see concentrating around the southeast and specifically zooming in on the Thames Valley. So all those little speckles of dots are all find spots or archaeological sites which have yielded Bronze Age material. And you can see a lot of it is focused around the Thames and the tributaries. We show both the course of the modern Thames and also the wider extent of how the Bronze Age Thames would have been. And of course, we're drawing on objects from our collections to try and illustrate some of the main types of those activities as well. So COVID was one of the greatest challenges that we faced. We had everything built in the gallery. We even had the objects loaded onto the van and en route to Docklands when Richard Sweet's director called us to say the lockdown was looking very likely and that we should turn around and return the objects to the museum wall, the London Wall, main museum of London. And that was Tuesday, just before the first lockdown, just over a year ago now. Over the next few months, it was decided that the exhibition would still continue, and we worked to make it as COVID secure as possible. We created a one-way route through the gallery, identified and marked areas where only one household bubble could occupy at a time, limited numbers and ticketed entry, sorry. The exhibition remains free to entry, but tickets allow numbers to be monitored. We increased the cleaning rota and adapted interactives, for example, installed foot pedals instead of finger touch pedals, and touchscreens became film instead. So we've worked incredibly hard to make this as safe as it could be. We were able to open in September of last year, and then again we had to close for lockdown number 2 and where we are at with lockdown number 3 at the moment. So we hope to reopen the museum in middle of May, pending government advice. I cannot wait to be able to welcome people back in and to be able to share this exhibition and the brilliant Havering Hoard with people. The museum's decided to extend the run of the exhibition until the 21st of August. So fingers crossed that the current trajectory with the pandemic continues and we head in the right direction. Please do visit as soon as we're open and it's safe to do so. The events programme is still running. Some have shifted to being online content, others have been delayed. Everything's listed on the website. I really hope to see you at the exhibition or one of the events. Thank you very much.
Okay.